There is a reason why some people struggle their entire lives while others seem to rise effortlessly. It isn't luck. It isn't fate. It's the way they think, the way they act, and the way they react to life. The poor stay poor not because they lack opportunity, but because they haven't yet understood how opportunity truly works. Every human being is born with the same gift, the power to choose, the power to think. But what separates the successful from the unsuccessful is how that power is used. The tragedy is that most people never stop to think about their own thinking. They follow the crowd, imitate others, and end up building lives based on someone else's definition of success. They trade their dreams for comfort, their imagination for routine, and their freedom for excuses. If you truly wish to escape the trap of poverty, whether it's financial, mental, or spiritual, you must first understand why the poor stay poor. Let's uncover 6 powerful truths that can change the direction of your life forever. Most people believe that poverty is a matter of luck, circumstance, or injustice. But the truth is far deeper. Poverty is not a lack of money, it's a lack of understanding. It begins quietly in the mind, invisible at first, then becomes visible in habits, choices, and the life one eventually leads. Every person alive has been given the same incredible gift, the power to think. Yet very few ever use that gift to shape their lives deliberately. The poor stay poor because they never truly grasp how powerful their minds are or how destructive their thinking can be when left on autopilot. A person's thoughts create their beliefs, and their beliefs dictate their actions. Most people accept their circumstances as permanent instead of as something that can be changed. They repeat the same ideas every day. Thoughts of limitation, fear, and doubt. They say, "I can't afford that. I'll never be able to do it." Or, "That kind of success isn't for people like me." They program their minds to stay exactly where they are. But life doesn't respond to complaints, it responds to conviction. The moment you begin to change the way you think about yourself and your potential, the entire direction of your life begins to shift. Habits are the invisible architecture of destiny. Everyday small actions build up to create enormous results. The poor stay poor because their daily habits reinforce their current state. They wake up without a plan, rush through their days, and use their free time for comfort instead of growth. They spend more than they earn, watch instead of learn, and react instead of act. But success doesn't come from one big effort. It comes from hundreds of small, consistent efforts done well. Replace one negative habit with one productive habit each day, and in a year you will hardly recognize your own life. The secret is consistency, not intensity. Another reason people remain poor is because of the illusion of comfort. Most never realize that comfort is a silent killer of potential. It feels safe, but it traps you where you are. Every great success story was written by someone who was willing to face discomfort, who chose to take the risk, to be embarrassed, to be misunderstood, and to fail again and again until success became inevitable. The poor often choose the easy route, the steady job that requires no growth, the evening in front of the television, the avoidance of hard decisions. But comfort costs more than struggle. It steals the future piece by piece until there's nothing left but regret. Growth hurts, but it's the kind of pain that builds strength, confidence, and freedom. Most people are also poor because they misunderstand money. They see it as something to earn and spend, not something to grow and protect. They work for money instead of learning how to make money work for them. They chase it emotionally rather than study it intelligently. Money obeys laws, just like gravity or motion. And those who understand its laws are never poor for long. Learn how money moves, how it multiplies, how it rewards discipline and punishes carelessness. The poor stay poor because they avoid learning about it, yet complain about not having it. The first step to mastering money is to respect it enough to study it. Environment is another silent force that determines success or failure. You cannot outgrow the mindset of the people you spend the most time with. If you're surrounded by people who complain, who fear change, who make excuses, you will begin to think the same way. Your environment will either pull you up or drag you down. To rise, you must sometimes leave behind what is familiar. Seek people who challenge you to think bigger, who inspire action instead of comfort, who live by example instead of talk. The poor stay poor because they seek validation from their surroundings instead of transformation. And finally, the greatest difference between those who stay poor and those who rise is purpose. Purpose gives direction to effort and meaning to struggle. Most people drift through life reacting to circumstances, working for survival instead of creation. Without purpose, life becomes repetitive and empty. With purpose, every obstacle becomes fuel. It transforms work into art and struggle into growth. Purposeful people don't ask, "How can I get by?" They ask, "How can I become?" They don't wait for opportunity, they create it. The poor stay poor because they never define why they want to succeed. And without that why, no amount of effort can sustain them through adversity. The path out of poverty begins the moment a person decides to think differently, act intentionally, and believe that their life can be molded by their own hands. It starts with a decision, a quiet, powerful decision, to no longer live as they have lived before. It starts with new thoughts, new habits, new courage, and a new standard for what is possible. There comes a time in every person's life when they must face an uncomfortable truth. The reason they are not where they want to be is not the world around them, but the world within them. Poverty is not always about the size of a bank account. It is a reflection of the size of one's mindset. The poor stay poor because they have never learned to see beyond the limits of their present circumstances. They wake up each day believing life is something that happens to them instead of something that responds to them. The human mind is the most powerful instrument in existence, yet most people use it only to replay the past rather than design the future. The poor stay poor because they think in terms of survival while the successful think in terms of creation. Every result in life is an echo of thought. What we continually think about, we become. Those who dwell on fear, lack, and doubt attract more of the same. They focus on what they cannot do instead of what they can learn. They feed their minds with scarcity, not abundance. Thoughts become beliefs, beliefs become behavior, and behavior builds the reality one must live in. The tragedy is that most never stop to question their own thoughts. They live by mental habits inherited from family, society, and television, never realizing that what they think daily is quietly shaping their destiny. The first step to escaping poverty is not to work harder, but to think better. Habits are the quiet builders of a person's fate. They work in silence, unnoticed, until years later they reveal their power. The poor stay poor because they live in reaction instead of intention. They wake up late, chase deadlines, avoid responsibility, and use their evenings to escape rather than to grow. Days turn into months, and months turn into years, while they wonder why nothing changes. Yet every day, every moment, is a new chance to install a better habit, to read instead of scroll, to plan instead of react, to learn instead of complain. A person's habits either build their freedom or their prison. The difference between those who succeed and those who do not lies not in talent or opportunity, but in the small, consistent choices made when no one is watching. Most people never escape poverty because they are seduced by comfort, the comfort of routine, of familiarity, of avoiding risk. They trade long-term freedom for short-term ease. They tell themselves they are being realistic, when in truth they are being ruled by fear. Every person who has ever achieved greatness has done so by walking straight through discomfort, by accepting temporary pain for lasting growth. Comfort feels safe, but it silently drains ambition. It is better to struggle for a season in pursuit of progress than to live a lifetime in the safety of stagnation. The poor stay poor because they mistake comfort for happiness, when in reality comfort is the slowest form of failure. Ignorance about money is another silent chain that keeps people trapped. Money is not mysterious. It follows simple, teachable laws, but most never learn them. They see money as something to be earned and spent, not studied and managed. They work for money rather than making money work for them. They chase it emotionally, spend it impulsively, and fear losing it instead of mastering how it moves. Those who understand money know that it rewards discipline, patience, and strategy. Wealth is not built by chance. It is built by knowledge applied with consistency. The poor stay poor because they think money is the goal, not the tool. The company one keeps determines the direction one travels. People rarely rise above the expectations of their circle. The poor stay poor because they spend time with others who think the same way, who reinforce excuses and mediocrity, who discourage ambition by calling it unrealistic. A person becomes like the people they associate with most. To grow, one must surround themselves with people who challenge complacency, who make excellence look normal, who talk about ideas instead of gossip, and who inspire rather than drain. You cannot fly while clinging to those who refuse to leave the ground. The final trap is the absence of purpose. When a person has no clear goal, their energy is scattered and their actions lack meaning. Purpose creates focus, and focus creates power. Most people drift from one day to the next without a definite aim, working to survive rather than to build something meaningful. They live for the weekend, not for the mission. But those who find their purpose begin to attract opportunities that align with it. Purpose turns struggle into strength and repetition into mastery. The poor stay poor because they never define what they truly want or why they want it. Without a clear why, they settle for whatever life hands them, never realizing they were meant to design it instead. Poverty ends the moment a person awakens to the truth that their thoughts, habits, environment, and purpose are within their control. The shift begins when one chooses responsibility over excuses, discipline over comfort, and vision over fear. It begins when a person decides that their past does not define their potential and that their future will be built by deliberate design, not passive hope. Every life begins with potential, but few realize it. From childhood, people are taught to follow, to obey, to accept, and to fit in. They are told what is possible and what is not, what they should aim for and what they should avoid. Over time, this conditioning builds invisible walls around the mind. These walls are not made of stone or steel, but of beliefs about who one is and what one deserves. The poor stay poor because they live within these mental boundaries, never daring to test how far they could actually go. They believe the limits placed upon them are real, when in truth they exist only because they were accepted without question. Every person carries within them the same power, the power to think, to imagine, and to create. But this power can either free or imprison. The difference lies in direction. Most people use their imagination to worry, to fear, and to replay mistakes. They think about what could go wrong instead of what could go right. The mind becomes a magnet for doubt, and life reflects the doubt in every result. Poverty, in all its forms, is maintained by the consistent misuse of thought. The moment a person learns to master their mind instead of obeying it, their life begins to change. They start to see that circumstances are not fixed, that every problem carries within it the seed of opportunity, and that thinking differently is the first step toward living differently. Habits build the framework of a person's destiny. What one does repeatedly becomes what one becomes permanently. The poor stay poor because they underestimate the power of routine. They allow each day to unfold by chance, doing what feels urgent rather than what is important. They trade hours for entertainment instead of education, comfort instead of challenge, distraction instead of discipline. But those who rise understand that progress is built in small, consistent steps taken daily, even when motivation fades. It's not one big decision that changes a life. It's 1,000 small ones made in private, quietly, persistently, without applause or recognition. Each disciplined choice adds up until the results can no longer be hidden. Most people never escape the cycle of poverty because they seek security instead of growth. They fear failure more than they desire freedom. They want guarantees in a world that offers only opportunities. They chase safety at the cost of progress. But safety is an illusion. The world changes every day, and those who cling to comfort will be left behind by those who embrace uncertainty. Growth requires risk. It requires stepping into the unknown, failing, learning, and trying again. The difference between those who stay poor and those who succeed is not luck but willingness. The successful are willing to feel uncomfortable, to be misunderstood, to start small, and to persist through rejection. Money itself is neutral. It goes where it is respected. Those who stay poor often see money as a mystery or a burden rather than a tool. They believe it's something others control, something that comes and goes without reason. But money follows laws as predictable as gravity. It rewards those who understand it and punishes those who ignore it. Saving, investing, creating value. These are not secrets, they are principles, yet most never study them. They spend what they earn only what they need, and complain when nothing changes. Wealth is not about what you make. It's about what you keep, grow, and manage with purpose. The poor stay poor because they let emotions guide their financial choices instead of knowledge. Environment is destiny in disguise. Every person becomes like the people they spend the most time with. The conversations you have, the standards you accept, the energy you allow around you, all shape the person you become. The poor stay poor because they live surrounded by people who think the same way, who settle for the same things, who reinforce limitation through their words and attitudes. But growth requires separation. It requires surrounding yourself with people who are going where you want to go, who make you uncomfortable in the best way, who remind you of what is possible, not what is typical. There is one force that separates those who rise from those who remain purpose. A person without purpose moves in circles, repeating the same patterns, mistaking motion for progress. Purpose brings clarity to action, strength to perseverance, and meaning to struggle. It turns labor into legacy. Most people never discover theirs because they never ask the deeper questions. They focus on earning a living rather than designing a life. But purpose is the bridge between poverty and fulfillment. It gives reason to wake up early, to persist after failure, and to keep growing when it would be easier to stop. Change begins the moment a person accepts that their life is a result of their own design, that every belief, habit, and decision has led them here. From that moment forward, they are no longer trapped by their past or limited by their present. They can choose new thoughts, new actions, and new surroundings. They can decide that poverty, mental, emotional, or financial, will no longer be their inheritance. Most people spend their entire lives wondering why nothing changes, why the years pass but the results remain the same. They look outward for reasons, blaming luck, timing, or circumstance, yet the real cause lies much closer. Poverty, failure, mediocrity, all of these are rooted in thought. The poor stay poor because they never change the pattern of their thinking. They react to life instead of designing it. They follow what's familiar, repeat what's easy, and accept what's common. The truth is the world doesn't hold anyone back. People hold themselves back through the ideas they choose to believe. Everything begins in the mind. Every success story started as a thought, and every failure began the same way. The person who constantly tells themselves that life is unfair, that opportunities belong only to the privileged, that success is impossible, that programs their mind for limitation. Obedient, it delivers exactly what it's told to expect. Think small and life becomes small. Expect failure and failure follows. But the opposite is equally true. When a person begins to think with intention, to visualize success, to plan, to believe in possibility, the same mind that once imprisoned them becomes the very tool that sets them free. The poor stay poor because they live by habit, not purpose. They wake up each morning and repeat yesterday. They move through life mechanically, without reflection, without direction, doing what feels necessary, but never what feels meaningful. Habits are the foundation of every destiny. Small daily actions, repeated over months and years, either build freedom or reinforce struggle. A person who spends each evening distracting themselves from reality cannot expect to wake up to a better one. But a person who uses their evenings to learn, to plan, to develop discipline will eventually find that the world begins to open its doors. Success is never a sudden event. It is the inevitable result of disciplined patterns built quietly over time. Fear of discomfort is another silent force that keeps people trapped. Most people are unwilling to experience even a moment of inconvenience, let alone prolonged struggle. They avoid risk, avoid criticism, avoid the possibility of failure, and in doing so, they avoid growth. The comfort zone feels safe, but it is the most dangerous place a person can live. It lulls them into complacency, convincing them that staying the same is better than the unknown. But every form of success, every step toward progress, demands discomfort. Growth requires friction. Those who rise are not the most talented. They are the most willing to be uncomfortable. Another reason people remain poor is their misunderstanding of money. Money is not the enemy, nor is it the goal. It is a mirror. It reflects your habits, your discipline, and your level of understanding. Those who struggle with money often treat it emotionally rather than strategically. They chase it when it's scarce, spend it when it's plenty, and fear it when it's gone. They see it as a mystery instead of a system. But money is simple. It rewards value and punishes neglect. The poor stay poor because they avoid learning the basic principles that govern it. They spend impulsively, save rarely, and invest never. Yet wealth begins not with income, but with awareness. A person who studies how money moves, how it grows, and how it compounds, begins to gain control over their financial destiny. A person's environment is a reflection of their future. The people they spend time with, the conversations they have, the standards they tolerate, all determine the limits of their life. If you are surrounded by those who complain, you will begin to complain. If you spend time with those who make excuses, you will start believing those excuses yourself. The poor stay poor because they spend time with those who justify poverty. Change begins with association. Spend time with people who challenge you, who see beyond the immediate, who are building rather than settling, and your mindset will begin to shift in ways you never imagined. Purpose is the final element that separates those who grow from those who remain. Without purpose, life becomes repetition, work becomes labor, and time becomes survival. A person with no goal drifts, waiting for luck to intervene. But purpose provides energy that comfort cannot. It gives reason to rise early, to stay disciplined, to endure difficulty. It transforms effort into fulfillment and struggle into significance. Purpose turns chaos into direction. It is the inner compass that keeps a person focused when everything around them is uncertain. The poor stay poor because they never define what they truly want. They move through life reacting to circumstance instead of pursuing a vision. The moment a person sits down and decides who they want to become, what they want to achieve, and why it matters, they begin to rewrite their story. They stop being victims of their past and start becoming architects of their future. They stop hoping and start creating. They stop waiting and start acting. Poverty ends not when money arrives, but when clarity does, when a person finally understands that wealth begins in the mind long before it appears in the world. Every person carries within them the potential for greatness, yet most will live and die never discovering it. The difference between those who rise and those who remain is not chance, not birth, not circumstance. It is mindset. The poor stay poor because they never learn to think differently. They believe that success belongs to a chosen few, that life is decided by luck, that the world determines their worth. But life does not choose who will succeed. People choose it for themselves through their thoughts, their discipline, and their belief in possibility. The invisible battle between success and failure begins and ends in the mind. The poor stay poor because they think in terms of limits. They see barriers where others see opportunity. They look at what they lack instead of what they can build. Their minds are filled with reasons they can't instead of ways they can. Every thought carries creative power, and over time, those thoughts shape reality. People who dwell on scarcity unconsciously create it. They talk about problems more than solutions, dwell on the past more than the future, and repeat patterns that keep them trapped. The moment a person begins to guard their thoughts, to direct them toward growth, they take their first real step toward freedom. Habits form the skeleton of every destiny. Each day is a brick, and every brick builds the structure of one's life. The poor stay poor because their habits are controlled by comfort, not by vision. They live by impulse, doing what feels good now instead of what will feel right later. They start projects but never finish them, spend more than they earn, and rest before they've earned the right to. Success is not about doing extraordinary things, it's about doing ordinary things with extraordinary consistency. The difference between those who succeed and those who don't lies not in what they do once, but in what they repeat daily without fail. Comfort is one of the greatest traps known to man. It whispers softly, telling you there's no need to change, no need to push harder, no need to reach higher. It convinces you that stability is safety, when in truth stability without progress is decline. The poor stay poor because they choose comfort over challenge. They avoid discomfort at all costs, avoiding failure, avoiding rejection, avoiding the unknown. But comfort is deceptive. It feels good today, yet it quietly erodes tomorrow. Every person must choose between the pain of discipline and the pain of regret, and the poor often choose the latter without realizing it. Growth demands discomfort, and discomfort builds the strength that comfort never will. Money is neither good nor evil. It is neutral, responding only to knowledge and discipline. The poor stay poor because they misunderstand money's true nature. They chase it emotionally, spend it carelessly, and fear losing it. They work for it but never make it work for them. Money rewards those who understand its rules, those who save, invest, and multiply it instead of spending it as fast as they earn it. Wealth is built not by income alone but by awareness, by managing every dollar with intention and purpose. Poverty, on the other hand, is sustained by financial ignorance, by avoiding what must be learned and repeating what must be unlearned. A person's environment plays a greater role in their success than most ever realize. We are the average of the people we spend the most time with, the conversations we have, and the standards we tolerate. The poor stay poor because they surround themselves with others who think the same way, who justify mediocrity, who see ambition as arrogance and effort as unnecessary. The environment becomes an anchor, holding them where they are. But when a person begins to change their surroundings, when they seek those who dream bigger, act decisively, and hold themselves to higher standards, they begin to rise naturally. Association is contagious, so is limitation. Purpose is the force that turns struggle into strength. Without purpose, effort feels empty and directionless. The poor stay poor because they never define a clear purpose for their lives. They work only to survive, not to build something meaningful. They move from one job to the next, 1 year to the next, waiting for life to improve on its own. But purpose gives meaning to the smallest actions and transforms hardship into growth. It fuels perseverance when motivation fades and turns obstacles into lessons. A person who knows their purpose can endure any challenge, while a person without one is easily broken by even small resistance. Change begins with awareness. The moment a person recognizes that their circumstances are a reflection of their thoughts, habits, and environment, they gain the power to rewrite their story. Poverty is not a destiny. It is a pattern, and patterns can be changed. The first act of transformation is a decision. The decision to think differently, to act with intention, and to surround oneself with influences that nurture growth. The mind is both the seed and the soil, and whatever is planted in it will grow, whether weeds or fruit. The poor stay poor because they allow weeds to grow unchecked, unaware that they could cultivate something far greater if only they chose to plant better seeds. Every person is born with the same potential, yet not everyone learns how to use it. The difference between those who succeed and those who struggle lies not in talent, not in opportunity, but in understanding. The poor stay poor because they misunderstand the source of their power. They look outside themselves for change when the true force lies within. They believe success belongs to others, that fate determines their path, that life is something that happens to them instead of something they create. But the truth is, every thought, every choice, and every habit builds the life one lives. A person's reality is not given to them. It is built from within, one belief at a time. The poor stay poor because they think in terms of survival instead of creation. They spend their energy reacting to problems rather than designing solutions. Their focus remains on what they fear instead of what they desire. When the mind is filled with worry, it cannot imagine possibilities. When it is filled with doubt, it cannot build conviction. The mind creates exactly what it believes, and so long as a person believes they are limited, they will always find proof that they are. True wealth begins with a shift in consciousness, from seeing life as a series of obstacles to viewing it as a field of endless opportunity waiting for a prepared mind to recognize it. Habits determine the course of every destiny. Each day, every action compounds, shaping the person one becomes. The poor stay poor because their habits keep them chained to comfort. They postpone growth for tomorrow, telling themselves they'll begin when conditions are right. They seek motivation before action instead of understanding that motivation comes from action itself. Each small choice, a skipped opportunity, an hour wasted, a goal delayed, seems harmless in the moment, but collectively it creates a life that never moves forward. Discipline is the bridge between intention and accomplishment. Those who rise commit to habits that support their vision, even when no one is watching, even when progress is slow, even when results are invisible. Comfort is one of the greatest illusions that hold people back. It promises peace but delivers stagnation. Most people stay poor because they mistake comfort for happiness. They do not realize that comfort is the slow decay of potential. Growth always feels uncomfortable. It demands risk, failure, embarrassment, and persistence. Those who rise are not fearless. They simply act in spite of fear. Every successful person has felt the same uncertainty, the same doubt, the same pain, but they refuse to surrender to it. The poor stay poor because they retreat from discomfort, seeking ease in the present while sacrificing progress in the future. But discomfort is the birthplace of transformation. Nothing beautiful ever grows without resistance. Ignorance about money is another silent prison. Many see money as the root of problems, while others see it as salvation. The truth is, money is neither. It is a reflection of understanding. The poor stay poor because they never study how money works. They work for it but never learn how to make it work for them. They spend emotionally, live reactively, and ignore the principles that govern wealth. Money rewards patience, planning, and respect. It flows toward value and away from carelessness. Those who learn its rules are no longer controlled by it. They control it. The gap between poverty and prosperity is not opportunity. It is awareness. Environment shapes the mind as powerfully as thoughts do. The people one spends time with create the standards one accepts. The poor stay poor because they surround themselves with those who reinforce limitation. They speak the same language of lack, share the same frustrations, and call ambition unrealistic. But no one can rise in an environment that keeps them small. Growth requires courage to step away from comfort, to seek new influences, to find people who make progress feel normal. The environment either nurtures success or suffocates it. To change one's surroundings is to change one's future. Purpose gives power to persistence. Without it, life becomes routine, filled with effort but lacking direction. The poor stay poor because they live without a clear sense of why. They work to survive, not to create. They trade their time for wages without realizing that their time could build something far greater. Purpose transforms ordinary work into meaningful pursuit. It gives energy where there was exhaustion, clarity where there was confusion, and strength where there was fear. Those who find a purpose greater than themselves rise naturally, for they are no longer driven by necessity but by conviction. Change begins when a person decides to take responsibility for their own life. It begins the moment they stop waiting for rescue, stop blaming the world, and start building themselves. Every great transformation begins quietly, with a decision, new thought, a single step taken with faith. Poverty ends not when money appears, but when awareness awakens. When a person realizes that success is not something to chase, but something to become.